Welcome back to our second official recording session for Terminal Rank and Legier's Woodshop. This week, very happy to welcome a good buddy, Jay. Jay, as we've talked about before, as I was describing him to Amanda, and James is like the most interesting man in the room. When I met Jay 5, 6 years ago now, it was actually at a charity event, charity ride. It's called Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. It was, I want to say it was my first year doing it here in Hawaii. There was like seven people showed up. Uh,
2017, buddy.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it was 7 years ago. Jay happened to be one of those other seven people, and really quickly hit it off. Became pretty good friends. We would go riding a whole bunch after that, and just stayed close ever since. And then in like 2019 or 2020, after I'd already known him for a while, I first heard that Jay had competed at the Warrior Games. I was like, wait, huh? Like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, man. He's like, I was at the Warrior Games. I'm like, when? A few years ago. I'm like, how have I never heard about this? Um, at that time, I think Jay was in his transition out of the Navy and was pursuing coffee, traveling the world, roasting the finest beans. It's just like, well, hey, that's pretty cool. Next thing I know, he's like, oh, I'm gonna dabble in some politics. Thinking about doing this or that. And then just here recently, he's like, yeah, man, I'm starting this the whiskey lab. Dude, what is it that you haven't done? Are you going to be an astronaut next? So yeah, man, just you have a very, very colorful kind of path to where you're at now. Why don't you go ahead and take a couple minutes, kind of fill in the blanks there, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to meet everyone. Thank you for having me on your show. This is really cool. You know, being called interesting gloats my ego a little bit, but really, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. What am I good at? And it's just bouncing around. But yeah, I think, Nick, where you and I hit it off is we're creators in a sense that we don't like to just hire people to do something for us. We like to figure it out and try to do things ourselves. So, and that is not a normal thing in today's society. It's a few things. It may be normal with those of us who served, but trying to figure things out and do it for yourself is really what pushed me to these different paths. And I'm really surprised we didn't talk about that. But 2017 is when I did the Warriors games. And then 2018, I did Invictus games. And while I was over in Sydney, Australia, we get off the plane. They're playing some music for us. We walk outside, and there's a big welcome party. And there's this little cart, this coffee cart. And it's a retired sailor from the Australian Navy who set up this coffee company. He did it after he retired, and all his profits go to charity to help injured veterans in Australia. And that's what really kicked me off to start that coffee company. And I did travel the world. I found some really good coffee. I was very good at the operation of getting things set up. What I was not good at was business. And so I sold like 700 kilograms of coffee, but it wasn't a scalable venture. I had a lot to learn still, and I knew that. So I didn't try to dive in too much into debt and set something up that I wasn't confident that I could successfully scale and set up. And that's when I went back to where I'm at now, DC, to get into a couple different communities. So intelligence community, that political gamble, no, I did not pursue that. I did learn about it. I talked with some representatives. I was up in upstate New York, where I'm from. John Katko was the sitting representative there for the Republican Party. I was considering running on the Democratic card, but there was two other Navy veterans running against John, and I really like Representative Katko, John Katko. I like what he stands for and how he voted. So I didn't want to run against him, and I sure as hell didn't want to run against two other Navy vets. But that was all. That's it for politics. And I'm not sure where to go from there. There's been quite a bit. Yeah.
So how is it that when I saw the video, I think when I found out about you doing the Warrior Games, and I do remember you going off to do the Victus Games, you had sent me a news clip that basically was like a highlight of you there. Blew my mind. So why don't you just describe that? Because I'm sure there's people that are going to be watching and kind of curious of how you ended up there,
Sure.
and how that kind of changed things for you.
The Warrior Games are Paralympic events. It's the Olympic events, the events that you would see in the Olympics, but it's meant for injured military, whether it's physical or mental ailments. And what it is really is a way for those who've been injured going to recover faster. And I'll say going through the training and being part of that team and being around other people who have been injured in a similar fashion that I was just expedited the speed of my recovery and getting back on my feet. So I'd say that's the main point of the Warrior Games. But what it is the branches of the military, the Air Force, the Navy, Army and Marines, and I guess the Space Force will be part of the Air Force now. And then some fellow allied nations, the United Kingdom goes, Canada goes. There's a whole bunch that go. This was in Chicago in 2017, and then 2018 the Invictus Games, which was the international version of that. Same sports, and then it's been going back and forth since then. There's the Invictus Games and Warrior Games, but again, it's Paralympic events for injured military. Whether you're active duty, they try to prioritize active duty, or veterans, people who are medically retired or just got out of the military. And how I found my way to that was I was injured. I was a submariner, had a head injury out of Guam when I was deployed out of Guam. And going through recovery after having surgery in Hawaii, I heard about the Warrior Games. And I just tried out. Well, I had started going to the gym, and I was pretty quick on my feet, I thought. I was the fastest guy on Team Navy in 2017, and then I start racing against some Air Force guys, and it looked like I was sitting still running next to those guys.
In your defense, they
show.
do have a lot more downtime.
There we go. But the guy who beat me, like smoked me, he ended up going on like TV, professional athletic shows, something that The Rock did. This guy was
okay.
This guy was a beast. But yeah, so it helped me recover. I did it for a few years. I did Warrior Games 17 and 19 and Invictus Games in 18. And I've been invited to go try out. But again, the spirit is recovery, helping those get back on their feet. And I was doing great. I had progressed so fast for myself and getting back on my feet and finding a career after the military. I didn't need to do it again. So I always support it. I still talk to people who go, but I haven't tried out, and I don't intend to. It's for people who need it, and I don't.
Served its purpose. You got what you needed out of it. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's led me to a number of different ventures too. I still communicate with the team. And then the Admiral Mary Jackson, she did so much for the program and really pushed it for the Navy. And I still communicate with her and tell her about my business ventures. And I think she enjoyed some of my coffee when I was doing that. And we'll see about how it goes with the team and the whiskey venture I got.
Yeah. So good segue. Let's touch on that. What have you got now that that you're doing with the Whiskey Lab, and kind of what led you to that from where you were doing think tank stuff and all that?
Well, the Whiskey Lab is right now just a YouTube channel. And if you go to the website, it's a sign up. And what it actually is, it is a marketplace in a sense, where I have my own brand that I've been developing with my co-founder. It's called Whispering Waters. But I have a bottle next to me of whiskey. This is from Compass Box. This is Compass Box Hedonism. It was a special release from 2024. Now, Compass Box is a bigger company, and what they do is they do blends of whiskey. Like Johnny Walker, that's not a distillery. That's a blend of multiple distilleries. So Compass Box does blending, but there's other companies that produce whiskey, meaning they produce bottles that don't actually have a distillery, and they call them independent bottlers. And that's what Whispering Waters is. Our brand, Whispering Waters, is we're an independent bottler. We buy casks that are aged, or we put finishes on them, and then we bottle it and sell it. So it's single cask strength, and once it's gone, it's gone. It's never to be recreated. It's just 100% unique. Huh. And what we found is, well, one, I buy a lot of whiskey, and I'll go into how I got into that. I do a lot of different events. I do bulk purchase orders. Me and my friends, we buy a lot of whiskey from auctions or from overseas. But there's 94 independent bottlers in Scotland that bottle amazing Scotch that is not available in America. And that's what the Whiskey Lab is. While I have my own brand, I'm creating this website to be able to sell products from these independent bottlers that are great. But if you want to buy a bottle, you have to pay $80 to $100 to ship it from the United Kingdom to your door here in America. And so that's what the Whiskey Lab is. We have our own brand. but it's really, I intend for it to be America's go-to spot for independently bottled Scotch from a variety of brands. So when we launch next week, we actually have four brands, mine, and then 3 other brands that'll have a couple bottles available, covering a range of flavors. So that's the Whiskey Lab. How I came to that? Well, during COVID, I went and got an MBA, and we were all remote, and we just started.
Just knock that out because I had a couple of weeks free, so I went ahead and just.
I don't. It's from the University of Chicago, and did a lot for me. Help really fill the gaps I had from when I did the coffee business, and I had no idea really marketing, finance. I knew how to do operations. That's what we do in the military all day. We do ops.
And what's funny about that is that on our previous session, we had talked about opening a business. You want to get into it because you want to do your thing. And all of a sudden you learn real fast that there's all these other things that you actually have to do. And it takes away completely from, I want to make this. And it's like, yeah, now you have to do your vendor stuff. You got to merchandise, you got to be an accountant, all of that kind of stuff. And like you said, it gets to the point that a one-man show might not be enough to scale and really expand bigger than your little footprint without going broke.
Yeah, James, like your wood shop, you got orders and a lot of interests, and you probably learned a whole different skill set that you didn't know existed when it came to running a business.
Yep.
And that's generally the finance side. And it's like, how do you do taxes? How do you set up a business? Do you need an LLC? Should I be an S Corp? Where do I go about this operation?
We're figuring all of that out.
It's good to have partners. It's good to
That's
have
right.
I was doing nothing else
between,
running a shop and 4 kids and a side business. I had plenty of time for it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. Like, Amanda does not stop. So, like, when she messaged me about doing, I think she called me actually. She called me about doing this podcast. That was what, like 3.5, 4 weeks ago. I have no concept of time, but it was not a long time ago. And you called me again like 3 weeks ago, and you're like, "Hey, here's what I'm thinking. Get your calendar out. This is what we're gonna do." And I was like, "Oh, this is happening like now. Okay, all right. No better time like the present. Let's get after it."
Hey, you gotta go with the momentum sometimes,
Yeah.
Well, if you want to get things done, go to someone who's busy, because that means they know how to get things done. And Amanda, I'm sure you just said how busy you are. You can get things done, so you're dependable.
Well, it's about learning to delegate too, and getting comfortable with that, because that is something that I find that a lot of people really struggle with, including myself. And, you come onto these projects that you're starting, you've done multiple projects, throughout your career. And it's, it becomes your baby, and who better to take care of your baby than you? But at some point in time, you've got to get all the other things done. So, how many people currently are participating in helping you with Whiskey Lab, or is it still just a solo venture for you?
There's 2 of us. So it's me and my good friend, Mark Sumlin. And it's just been us. Now we have a number of partners that we're working with. We have an import company that we've partnered with. We have a couple of different retail outlets that we've partnered with. We have a UK representative that we're working with as our bottling line. I'm part of a group of cask managers and traders, and that's a whole story right there. With Whiskey Cask Investment, let me warn you, don't do it. But it's really a team operation. But the Whiskey Lab is two guys, and we've been working on this for a couple of years, and we haven't sold anything yet. We've put a lot of money into training and figuring things out, setting up the pipeline. And so, yeah, it's just 2 of us.
And how are you making those? How are you making those connections for your contact in the UK and all these other bottling companies or distilleries? Is it just like cold calling people, like, "Hey, man, I've got this thing that I'm working on"?
I have, yeah. It's knocking on doors and dropping emails, making phone calls. I've done a lot of phone calls. I've made some mistakes, and I've learned who's who and who you don't want to talk with. And so it's not an easy process. In America, there's the 3-tier system, and that's why these small companies, independent bottlers in Scotland, do not come to America is because it's such an arduous process. So I read the laws, I learned the language, and then I started making the context that I needed to make this happen. But for everyone that I'm partnered with now, I've cut maybe twice as many of that out of like, hey, I'm not interested in working with them type of deal.
So what were some of those big, roadblocks that you ran into, particularly with Whiskey Lab? Anytime you're dealing with alcohol or anything that is, within the controlled realm, that just adds a whole other layer of bureaucracy and paperwork and legal issues. Have you been able to navigate that?
It's just a lot of time and effort. It's like many things in life, it just takes time. There is the ttb.gov. It's the replacement 3-letter acronym for the ATF, called the Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms. But TTB is where you register for federal permits. You have to get a federal permit before you can do anything, whether you're producing, distributing, or selling. You could be importing or wholesaling. There's a couple different things there. But then you got to get state approval. Then you got to get county approval. And then you got to get city approval. And sometimes you need state approval to get city approval and vice versa. And then every state has their own laws. And then every county within that state has their own requirements.
Of course.
And where we're headquartered, we had to get a federal permit. We had to get permission from the city to be able to apply for a state permit. And the state had to verify that we had permission from the city, but they wouldn't write anything down. So it was like catch-22. You have to have permission written and signed, but they want to give you you had to have permission signed by both before one would grant the other. It's really weird. We made it happen.
Sounds like government work.
Somewhere in Jay's basement is a giant whiteboard just filled with like pictures of the places he has to go to and just strings going to each one.
I got better than that.
Okay.
And show and tell.
This is how you relieve stress. The grip trainer, I have 4 of these. And so whenever I'm on calls, I'm under the table just going, okay, yep.
They're all broken. None of them are springy anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if there is one thing the military sets you up for from the time you come in, is being able to deal with bureaucracy and paperwork. Hey, you can't sign my 31, my DA-31 until you have a flight, but you can't get the flight until you have approved leave. So, I mean, you're kind of right at home there.
It's my favorite book, Catch-22. It's so frequent in the military, that concept of a catch-22. Just any business in general, you can find that a lot. But when it's dealing with the government or government approvals and regulated industries, it is arduous, or can be.
So we've talked a little bit about Whiskey Lab and about some of your other ventures. One thing that Nick and I spoke about a few days ago, actually, was apparently you've also dabbled in photography as well. So how did you get into that?
I'm telling you, he's the most interesting man in the room. I was doing some photo stuff for my wife, and I don't even remember how I found out that Jay is just this conundrum of things. You're like, oh, I want to do this. He's like, I've done that. It's like, what so yeah, I actually, I had taken some photos of the wife and sent them over to Jay. Like, hey man, like I can't, like something's not right here. And I was like, can you just give me a pointer? He gave me like an hour-long YouTube session on like setting all sorts of stuff, and like he just knows it. And yeah, I think what we were talking about with Amanda and I was when you were leaving here, you had a party that was hosted downtown, and they displayed some of your photography. And I remember, of course, I'm going to go see you off, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to support my friend. I'm going to buy one of his photos, and got in there and I saw the price and I was like, hope to see you again, buddy. Like that's the thing. Like I wanted to support him. I couldn't financially, could not. However, I think Jay even offered, he's like, take this. I was like, no way, man. Like this is maybe not your livelihood, but you have a skill there. You have something that you should absolutely get paid every bit for. So like I'm not gonna take a several $100 display art piece and be like, thanks, bud, and like take it home. Like maybe if
That
you're
was
like, yeah,
kind of
this
the
is like
point.
$5.
It was all for donations. So it was under the coffee company enterprise, but it was just for donations. So I do recall that going over Photoshop, or excuse me, Adobe Lightroom with you,
Yeah.
when to use that versus Photoshop. And Amanda, photography, I picked up a Pentax K30 or something like that, maybe 15 years ago. It was the waterproof ones, and I remember I did a class in high school and I liked it, and I was stationed up in Saratoga Springs, New York. It's like I want to go photograph the sunset, so it was like a Black Friday deal, and I just picked it up. And then from there, I got into photography 15 years ago. It was all landscape, and with all the travel I had to do for the military, flying all over the world, I just brought my camera with me. And what I did with photography, and a lot in Hawaii, is I got up in the middle of the night and I went to the places that people thought were beautiful, and I'd film it at night and at sunrise. Not so much sunset. It was always middle of the night, and then trying to catch sunset or sunrise from black to where it was daylight. And so that's what I really like to do, because no one's around then. You might have two other people, but you kind of have the whole space to yourself of a very beautiful spot. And I just, that's what I did. And my webcam right now is a Fuji X-T5. I shot on all those photos you saw, Nick. That was from a Fuji X-T1 8 years ago. And so
I mean,
here I am.
true artwork. Like I remember, I want to say one of them was of downtown, and I don't know where you were, up on Tantalus, or where you got the shot from, but like it was absolutely amazing.
Analyst. I did a little bit out near you. Camped out there on the west side once. I had, I think, was it 2018 when the lava was flowing on the Big Island?
Yeah, that would have been the first eruption. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a pretty cool shot there. And then the coolest one I did was actually Mount Fuji. And that's not what people, that's my favorite. I got a shooting star over Mount Fuji, but most people get our airplane trails. So a jet flying over it. But I got an actual shooting star over Mount Fuji 2015. Now, that was one of my favorite photos. But what I like, Amanda, you as a photographer or an artist, and I find that what I think is my best is usually what no one's interested in, and the stuff I'm like, yeah, that's okay. That's what people like. And so I'm not good at judging what my work is.
I don't think anyone
like truly
it truly is, because the amount of times that someone has said like, oh yeah, this is an idea that I threw away. I didn't think was gonna be useful at all. And it doesn't matter who you are or how, there's a story about Stephen King. I believe it was Carrie, where he, that was one of his firsts, and he kind of threw it away and was like, oh, this will never do anything. And we saw what that became. And all the way down to those small brand new businesses that are starting up, ours included, of like, oh, there's no way that this one-off design that took me 15 minutes to make with just me messing around is going to be, anyone's going to want it. And then there's people, I need that. Not only do I want it, I need that thing that you were about to throw away. So it is always interesting as we go through these hobbies, these business ventures, to really see what other people respond to, because it isn't always the thing that we put tons of time and effort and are like, oh, this is going to be the greatest thing. And you get the shot lined up, or you have this idea and you think everyone is going to love this idea, and it just falls flat. And, so the moral of that story really just being, sometimes you just got to go for it and make the mistake or see what's successful. I think people will be surprised the more and more you start to put yourself out there, the more and more you start to put the things that you're making out there, the ideas that you have out there. You end up being surprised what people respond to. So I think that's one of my biggest takeaways from starting is, hey, you just all the planning in the world doesn't amount to actually just, finally putting yourself on the line, and getting it out in front of people. So, and I think you and a lot. I think you are really kind of a testament to that, of like, man, I'm gonna go do the Warrior Games. I'm gonna go do this thing over here. Hey, coffee, that sounds cool. Coffee. Let's do that. Like, a lot of people do not have that ability to just, see something and be like, hey, you know what? Let me give it a shot. What's the worst that can happen? So,
there's that fear of failure.
Yeah.
And then we can be our own worst critics too, where that's not good enough. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. Or like you said, you can plan. You can put a ton of effort into trying to make something happen. And it's almost like it's not as genuine as when you just do it.
Yep.
When you're in the zone, I love doing woodworking. That's kind of my new hobby. I haven't done photography in years. So James, I want to talk to you more, man. But like when I feel in the zone and I'm just doing, and I'm not worried about what anyone else thinks or trying to be perfect, that's when good stuff comes out of that.
Yep.
And I think that's when you get into the true artist aspect.
Those are my
come say
those
hi.
are my decompressed days in the shop.
My wife is saying goodnight to me. I'm sorry, guys.
No, you're good.
No,
you're good.
Yeah.
Good night, man.
That's a great looking hand.
Yeah. He's in her pajamas.
Those are some of the best decompression days that I have in the shop, is when I have orders that need to be fulfilled and I spend 2 or 3 days just becoming a heat cat out in the shop. And, on the 4th day, I'll walk out there and I'm like, all right, I'm not touching anything else. I'm going to sit here for probably 10, 15 minutes and just think and be in the space. I'm going to make something that, I've always wanted to try to do. I'm going to combine different materials into a ring that I've wanted to do for a long time. And it's probably going to break, but if it doesn't, then it'll be something cool. And those are the days where I turn the music up as loud as possible. I don't film anything because it allows me to just focus on the thing. And when I walk out of the shop after that, I'm like, you know what? That was perfect. That's what I needed. I needed that refresh day to just go out there and throw some stuff at the wall and see what stuck. No pressure, no eyes on me. And it helps me get out there the next day.
Do you think that's like, we're saying if you plan too much, over planning can be the enemy, and expecting perfection is the enemy of good enough. And so when you're just performing, it's like you're striving to be your best, but you're not judging it for perfection. So it's a fine line you can dance when you're being critical of yourself. But if you can turn off that it has to be perfect and just strive to perform at your best, that's when perfection really comes, when you're not actually saying it has to be perfect and you're just doing it.
Absolutely. It's getting to that.
That's the thing with business. Like, Amanda, you started a number of businesses now. You didn't plan for perfection, I bet. No. You just made it happen, I'm sure, in some ways. And
honestly, very rarely did we even plan to turn it into a business. It was something, they've all been things that are like, hey, let's do this. This sounds like a great idea. And,
this will be entertaining to us.
Exactly. And next thing you know, we're getting calls on like, hey, I need that shirt. Hey, I really want that candle. I really want that, and I think there's also kind of this, despite how big so many corporations are out there, and a lot of people are like, oh, I'll never be able to go against them. I can never go against a Grunt Style. I can never go against a McDonald's if I'm in fast food. I can never go against, Jack Daniels or Johnny Walker, because they're just these huge, they have all this money and everything behind them. But it's almost this perfect time, I feel, where one, people seem to really be looking for those smaller niche things that they connect with, that are not all of the big flashy noise, and that really represent them. So I think right now, for anyone out there thinking about starting a business or thinking about doing something new, thinking about going into some type of creation, you've got to take all of that, the big who you view as your competitors, out and realize they're really not. You're doing your own thing, even though they may be in that same space. They may be in the whiskey space. They may be in the Scotch space. They may be in the apparel space. But understanding that there is someone out there looking for what you have to offer, and you just really need to figure out how to hone in on that. James is a great example of, he got into woodworking. He didn't think it would turn into rings specifically and that be kind of one of his big things. But, you see all these materials that he's able to use, and people really gravitate towards things like that. So yeah, like
I was drinking bourbon, then I decided to start trying to make rings. I was just chilling on my couch, and I was like, oh, let me see if I can do this. Never made a ring in my life before that.
It's authenticity.
Yeah.
With these big firms, they all start off somewhere. Apple, the biggest companies in the world, Apple, Google, they started in the garage.
Yeah.
It all starts somewhere. And I think you're spot on with Amanda, and what people are seeking is authenticity that comes from small businesses.
Yes.
Where people are putting themselves into the products in some sense, or the services provided.
And then, the other kind of takeaway that I have seen from other business owners, especially business owners just starting out, is you become very brave very quick. And what I mean by that is, if you're normally, it doesn't matter if you're normally an introvert, you start going out to these vendor things, and that's what you have to do. When you have to start kind of promoting your products and reaching out to vendors and reaching out to strangers, essentially, not only do you really start to fall into it pretty quickly, but I have also found that how you look for and seek out opportunities is very different than it was before. Whereas before, you kind of see opportunity almost as something that has to come to you. I think once you start small businesses and things, you start seeing opportunities in areas that you would never have thought of before. And that's kind of another, just hidden gem of the growing process that is being in a small business, starting something, is being able to go out and find those opportunities.
You have to see opportunities.
Yeah. You have to. You'll die.
There's no one to fall back on.
Yeah.
You have to.
Yeah. That's how I got involved with Walk Among Heroes. I saw a post they did on Facebook one night, and again, I was drinking bourbon again. I think bourbon is the secret to my good ideas.
It probably is. Bourbon is your muse.
And
we like you better when you're drinking bourbon.
Yeah. I ran out today, so I'm drinking beer, unfortunately. But yeah, I was watching a video they posted of a World War II veteran they took to Omaha Beach, and I was like, hey guys, I make rings with sand from Omaha Beach and Iwo Jima Beach. I'd love for you guys to present them to your veterans next year or this year when you go to Omaha Beach. And I messaged them on Facebook. I messaged them on Instagram. I commented on their YouTube, and I sent an email through their website in a matter of 5 minutes. And the next morning I woke up and they were like, here's our cell phone number. Let's talk. And I was like,
yeah,
it worked.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
It's because you're real, man. You're trying to do something genuine. That's awesome. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And I love that whiskey was part of that. I love that whiskey was part of that.
I mean,
I see a collaboration potential between James and Jay. If James, Jay, you have casks and barrels. You could do a limited run, and James here can make you guys some custom
I could do
jewelry to go with.
Yeah, limited Whispering Waters barrel stave rings.
Okay.
I've done a couple of Pathies, a couple of Buffalo Traces. So.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
We definitely.
There you go.
We definitely.
Like there's always opportunities everywhere to you really do start seeing the world differently. It's like having
James is here because he can talk whiskey. I cannot.
I couldn't start talking whiskey until about 6 years ago. I started watching the Whiskey Tribe on YouTube and got obsessed.
Good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one. We have our own channel. We're nowhere near as good as those guys. They know what they're doing.
Yet.
I remember when I started with them, they had like 15 videos out. It was just Daniel for the longest time, and then Rex came in. They didn't have their whiskey yet. They didn't have their facility.
Yeah.
They had mentioned it one time as like a joke, like, wouldn't it be crazy if we did that? And then like 5 years later, I'm following them and they're like, so we did that. And I was like, good for you guys. That's what I'm talking about.
All starts somewhere.
Yeah,
exactly. Although we are going to get, we do need to get Nick's first official whiskey tasting on camera one of these days.
Yes, we do. Yes,
Nobody wants to see that.
No, we're gonna do that this September. I'm gonna try to get with the owners of one of my favorite bars in the world and coffee shops. It's the Manifest in Chinatown, Honolulu. I think it's one of my favorite spots. But Nick, we're going there. We're drinking.
Let's do
it. Did Jay just lay down a teaser for September?
Yeah,
I think it sounds that way. We're gonna hold him to it. We've got it on film.
Yes, that's right.
It's in the
I'll
cloud.
be there.
Get rid of it once it's in the cloud.
Me and my child's palate will definitely be there for comedic relief.
There you go. You gotta start somewhere. Gotta start somewhere.
You know, we should. You know what? We should just do a whole series in Chinatown of like different Chinatown downtown spots and watch Nick slowly get hammered on and see how his opinion changes.
God,
are you trying to get canceled? Because that's how we get canceled.
That would be horrifying. Everybody in Chinatown.
That's why we don't go live. That's why we don't go live.
Yeah.
It's
record it all and then post it.
What is his last name? We were just talking about him. He did the comedy special, worked on the Chappelle show.
Oh, Brennan. Yeah, Neil Brennan.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like, no, if they're a true friend, no one can show your texts because you'll all get canceled. So,
yeah,
we edit.
There you go. So, can you guys tell me about your channel, what you are doing here, and what brings you three together?
Yeah.
We don't know yet. Good question. When we figure that out.
No, so in all honesty, it's a couple of things. One, we each have our businesses. Nick and I with Terminal Rank. Nick also has Full Spectrum Creations, and then James. Yep. We all kind of started around the same time. We have that same background, and really, it's about just kind of as we go through and learn this process. There's hundreds, thousands of people out there just like us that are also trying to wade through this process. So why not take them along for the ride? See what kind of cool people we can pick their brains on in the meantime, and really see where it goes. We actually started more with an audience in mind, hence the reason we still have no name yet, which we're still working on. We will get it before we release before we actually release all of these.
No promises.
Yeah, no promises the name's going to be good. So far, it's, I think the lead is Where's Zach podcast.
No, the Zach's Not Here podcast.
Yeah, the Zach's Not Here podcast.
So Jay, to fill you in, Jay, we have a third business partner named Zach. He, again, for session 2, unavailable. Eventually.
Run with it.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. So where's that?
Very similar. The Whiskey Lab that was just a placeholder because I tried 20 other names and it didn't work. Like the Whiskey, just we'll register as the Whiskey Lab and we'll figure the name out later.
Yep.
It just stuck.
Yeah.
So I like Zach's Not Here. That's awesome.
Yeah, Zach's Not Here.
Yeah. So we do make it a point to make fun of him at the end of every episode so far, but yeah, it's really about all of us as veterans. I'm still active duty. Nick has retired. Zach is still active duty. James ETS. His spouse was in the military. My spouse was in the military. But one of the things that we noticed is it seems like there's a very strong tribe, if you will, of people that get out of the military and, join this tribe where they all wear the same shirts, drink the same coffee, drink the same energy drinks, kind of have the same look, the same thoughts on everything. And it was like, well, we don't fit into that, but we're still veterans. And there's a lot of us out there. There's a lot of us starting businesses. There's a lot of us that are really proud of our service, but our service doesn't necessarily define us. And there's a lot of us out there doing business and working to grow our businesses and working to build our networks. As veterans, we are in a unique position because we are one of the few career fields and professions out there where your job ends up creating a network for you. we all know people in Europe, in Australia, in in Korea, in Japan, that we can kind of reach out to. Why don't we figure out a way to bring these people together, to see what their experiences are, as they've started building their businesses, to see how they got there, what's led them to this point, and at the end of the day, maybe even make some connections to help each other grow. In the military, we're all there to help each other, complete our mission. What's different now that we're out? Well, really nothing, except finding a place and a way to get everyone together. So that's really, at its core, what we kind of are getting at. Eventually we'll get there and get a bit more concise, but for now it's three friends fucking off and bringing other people along for the ride and seeing how everyone's doing and checking in.
I love that.
That could be the synopsis of our time in Hawaii together. It's just three friends fucking off and seeing what happens.
There you go. That's awesome.
Yeah. So
network is the name of the game. Networking makes such a difference. And when you're a business owner, you have to. The leads for business or opportunities can come from the relationships you make, the impact you leave on people after you tell them about who you are and what you do. And, I said something about an MBA earlier. That's the value of an MBA. Anyone can buy books and read and learn, but it's the network that you build when you go into college for anything, really. Or just like in the military, when you get these qualifications, you're part of this unit. Well, you know anyone else in that particular unit, whatever qualifications you had, what their skill sets are and what you could expect from them in some way. So it's networking that can really help make and can break a business if you create a bad name for yourself. So that's awesome. I love what you guys are doing. I have to think about this. When I meet people, I like to think about introductions I could make for them to help them. And so I have to refer someone for you guys to talk to. I got to think about who would be good for you guys to talk to. Or at least I want to. If you want me to do that, I'd love to.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Someone far more interesting than me, maybe have some hair. So.
No one with hair is interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be hard to top someone with Jay's resume on this podcast.
I can help. I've done some cool stuff, but it was, let me go try that. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Let me figure it out. So what I found, I think that the people similar to me that aren't afraid to try something new, it just means they're not afraid to fail. And that's what business is. You can't be afraid to fail. You have to venture out. You have to take risks. You have to push boundaries if you want to achieve greatness. There's no such thing as greatness that comes from homeostasis. And that's why I think I've been successful. But there's also the people who, from the age of maybe 13, hey, I'm going to do this in life. And that's what they did. And that is even rarer to find people who spend 20 years in the industry because that's what they love. That's what they want to do. And I find them to be extremely admirable. And I look up to people like that. So I have a few people in mind that I want to introduce you to that just, I knew I was going to do that. I was like, I read a book when I was like 4.5, and that's what I did for something ridiculous.
Like, Amanda's going on pause.
Amanda's disciplining
yelling at kids.
That's how it goes. Dude, I had a little party.
How'd you
today.
know?
I have a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. And at my 2-year-old's birthday party, we had maybe 10 kids here. I looked around, I'm like, wow, my son is the worst behaved out of all these kids. Like, I have the worst kid of everyone I know. And then today we have a group of people over. Nick, do you remember Mike Sear? He had the same bike that you did, and in 2018 when we rode for the ride, he showed up there. Same exact bike that you had. I'll send it. We got a photo together. I'll send you a photo.
I'm sure we do.
He just moved to DC, and he's got.
Okay.
We have kids the same age, and once again, my little 2-year-old's going nonstop, trying to break glass with his screams. So I know the difficulty of
I
I need to
look
take
at
care of my kids.
parenting though. I mean, you have your good days, you have your bad days. So I do always kind of have to smile
When did
on.
the good days come?
I don't know. Eventually, never at your house, by the way.
Not
But
with Lawful.
where
That's
sometimes
crazy.
your kid is the best behaved kid in the area, and other times they are hands down the worst. So you just kind of have that parenting bond with others, where when their kid is the one
As
screaming,
Oh yeah.
you're like, it's okay.
Oh, I know that scream. I know that
Yeah,
cry.
exactly. I know that.
as long as they're the good kid somewhere else, like
Yes.
I can put up with them being the worst kid when they're here.
Yes.
Yeah.
If they're the worst kid when they're somewhere else, you're definitely doing something wrong.
Yeah. That's a good measure.
That's a good one.
metric.
Yeah.
Yes. So Jay, you did say you guys that we're going to actually be launching next week. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. As I pour myself my last for the evening. So
He just starts drinking right from the bottle.
yeah.
Like it's going great.
been working on it.
Like,
What I didn't say is that we're going to start a distillery. That's a
Oh.
whole other story. I never wanted to. I always wanted to do what we're doing now. And I just got the nudge like, oh no, you guys should because X, Y, and Z. And so I started doing it. I went to a place called Moonshine University. That is a thing. It's not a university. It's a people from around the world literally go here to learn about.
well, we're going
production
to
and
now make a
scaling.
Moonshine University shirt.
Yeah. It's
Just for you.
There you
it's
go.
James. It's James's backyard with all the hillbillies like running liquor in the
We'll just
woods.
have like a bathtub on it and like Moonshine University.
With a couple with pennies is copper to help produce.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
Someone melting pennies
So-
like to make it into a still.
There you go. I won't go too long, but learning the business, the difference between Scotland and here. There's 140 distilleries in Scotland. There's almost 3,000 in America.
Wow.
Insane. It's so oversaturated. And so I already said what
What's
the
one
whiskey
more?
lab is, and we decided not to do a distillery, and I'm very glad. But I picked a date because we had been working and planning. I'm like, June 1st is the date. We're gonna do it by June 1st. The website's gonna launch. It's gonna have this. This was 2 months ago because we've been working on this for 8 months, and I said we just have to do it. Pick a date and make it happen. And I'm going to be up all night this coming week, fixing and finalizing things and having products, but I'll have 5 bottles of whiskey for sale on the website. That'll ship to at least 39 states direct to your door from the website. And these are whiskeys that you cannot buy in America right now. So that's what's happening June 1st. The difference is these are pre-orders. Doesn't mean that's not going to come. It's just things have been delayed. So I'm putting up a spot where you can pre-order, and then my goal is to be delivered by Father's Day. So it might be a 2-week delay,
That's
and
not bad.
then anything that goes on the website after that will be ready to ship. 2 to 3 days shipping overall. But what it really is, this is a curated taste. Everything that goes on the whiskeylab.com, and that's whiskey with an E, is something that I've tasted, I say is great, and I recommend, along with the co-founder Mark. So it's not just some marketplace where tons of whiskey. These are tried and true, validated, and come highly recommended. Each page will have a video with the founder of that whiskey bottle talking about the tasting and why they did that. So something a little more personal that tells you everything, the creation story of that special single cask release.
Count
That's
me in.
first. So
And
I
that'll
will buy
be
another bottle that we're.
go ahead.
And
Yeah,
what-
because I'll buy another bottle of whiskey that will sit up on the shelf, and I'll be like, one day.
one day in September.
Next time
September.
I'm in Hawaii, Nick, I'm just gonna sneak into your house and grab one of those bottles.
There you go.
Take it
Just
to
for
a good
display
home.
only
Bandit.
bottles.
That's right.
See, we'll
I
have.
hope it's not like fire.
So Nick, everyone knows that I'm an awful warrant officer. I don't drink coffee. So since
That's
they
not the
do-
only reason.
Well, it's one of the many reasons. It's, on the top of the list.
Yeah.
Since I don't drink coffee and you don't drink whiskey, during the day we can go in for a coffee tasting And then at night, we'll do the whiskey tasting for you.
Yes.
Here we go.
Balance
There
each
we
other
go.
out. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Good business
And
plan.
then for like the
we have
midday
like a
sprint,
plan.
we'll do a little
Amanda.
coffee with a little whiskey.
Yeah, that's the best way to drink coffee.
The transition point.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we have a super hyper Amanda and a super drunk Nick running around Chinatown.
What could go
with
wrong?
Jay trying to keep them together.
That sounds like it.
There you go.
We'll be looking for Zach.
We'll be looking for Zach.
We'll be on the lookout for Zach. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here for us. He's had a bit of a flare up with personal issue, so not able to sit for long periods of time right now. If you catch my drift.
You now need to make shirts for September that just say "Looking
Where's
for Zach."
Yeah. We'll do it. Let's do it. That'll be the
man.
theme of the show. We try to find Zach while we get hopped up on coffee and bourbon.
Waldo died and has been replaced by Zach.
Exactly. We'll do coloring books next. Where's Zach?
Where's Zach?
That's funny. Oh, I got to meet this guy now.
Okay.
Good luck.
We asked him to do like 3 things the last few weeks. I've done them all for him. Although I do still need
You're
to
an
find
enabler,
out.
that's why.
I am. Maybe we should call us the enablers then. We should be the enablers podcast. Because we're not like grunt style. We are enablers. It goes hand in
I'm adding
hand.
it to the list.
There you go.
Yeah.
So far we've got the Where's Zach
Our-
podcast or the Enablers podcast.
That's a funny name. I think people would watch that.
I think so too.
Like, what is this? What is this all about?
Who's this
Yeah.
Zach character?
This has nothing to do with anyone named Zach.
Yeah.
Nothing. Are we gonna do a hot topic of? Are we gonna do a hot topic
sure.
of the week?
Let's go ahead and
or-
do a hot topic this week. The last episode was beers.
Jay, you got a few more minutes for us?
Beers.
Yeah. I mean, it's early for me. I got a couple more hours, but let's do the hot
okay.
topic.
All right. So
Shit,
why don't we
all
go
right.
ahead and delve into some good news. It'll be a good news hot topic. Bipartisan Congress is always a good news, as is pay increases for junior soldiers. So we'll start there, and we will focus on the proposed 15% pay raise for junior enlisted troops in the militaries, ranks
Dang.
E1 through E4. Now, keep in mind, this is part of a larger effort that also includes things like improving barracks, improving access to childcare, and a number of other things. It was overwhelmingly passed. There was only one representative that did not vote in favor of it. So it will go, I believe it's going to the House next. So let's go ahead and talk about the much needed 15% increase to these young service members. It would would roll out next year. And then they would also receive the additional, I think it's an additional 4.3% pay raise that will go for all people in the military service. So at the end of the day, next year would be a big year for them with like a 19.4% pay raise for E1s through E5s. Now, just to put it into context, what this would mean for most of these junior service members is, that's huge, obviously, but it is to provide additional stability, to help with childcare, to help with especially those with families. The problem we've had is even though we do the incremental pay increases, the junior soldiers have not had any type of significant pay bumps. So whilst more senior leaders' pay has increased, 4% of thousands of dollars versus 4% of hundreds of dollars, there starts to be a gap, and where they're now looking to close that gap a bit. So Nick, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Oh, I go first. No, I think it's probably long overdue, especially with the way the economy is anyway, with inflation that's may or may not be coming down or whatever, but still, everybody knows military pay compared to a civilian sector is significantly lower, which is why you've got first termers that are like, screw this, I'm getting out. The Army just trained me in a technical, skill set. Like, why am I going to stick around and live paycheck to paycheck? Or I can hop out and make 2, 3, 4 times as much without all of that other army, stuff. So yeah, I think it's long overdue. That's huge that they're going to get this 15% bump, and then additionally their typical 4%. So it's going to be a huge year for them. I think it goes a long way to hopefully increase morale, which leads to better retention. We need to make the military more appealing than the alternative. There's too many people now that have zero interest in not only military service, but any type of government service. I think we need to get back to that where like people are proud to be like, I'm going to go join the military. And everyone around them is like, that person knows what they're doing. So yeah, I think that's a good step.
James?
I mean, Nick touched on it pretty well with the increase in morale, which should lead to increased retention. I mean, we talked about it on the last show with the beards and allowing beards and doing all that. If they go through and do that, that's just another small thing that the military can do to increase that morale and to sustain those soldiers who may be on the fence. For the longest time, what we've seen is such small increases in pay for these junior soldiers. It's the equivalent of management saying, like, hey, here's a pizza party for you guys for all the hard work you did all year. Like, you get a pizza party, but only one topping, and we're only getting 6 pizzas. Like,
one slice each.
When you as a soldier or as an employee can look at the organization you're in and see the moves that they're making, and in doing that, see that they appreciate you for what you are, it keeps you in longer, especially on those really crappy days where you're going to work, you're doing guard duty, you got a range the next day, you got a PT test 2 days later, all this stuff that can burn out soldiers. The fact that they're, now more financially comfortable, hopefully most of them don't go and buy a Dodge Challenger at 27% interest with this new pay bump. But those are the types of things that are going to keep people in and are going to convince people to come in and join the ranks of the military going forward.
Okay, Jay.
Amanda?
I'm going next.
Amanda, you're gonna close it out? Now let's give Jay the final word because he's gonna drop some knowledge. Okay. Some knowledge.
You know
on
what?
us.
All right.
It's gonna be like an epiphany moment.
You're right. That's what we keep you around. You're not just here for a pretty beard. Every once in a while, some wisdom comes from it. So, I am.
That's what all these grays are from.
Yeah. Those are from your military service.
Yeah,
that's true. True.
So I don't think that there's a lot of people, and I mean clearly by this being one of the few things that almost 100% wholeheartedly brought both parties together on yes, this is needed. It's been needed for a long time. It's been something that we've, I remember when I came in. Fortunately, I came in as an E4. An E4, no kids in Hawaii wasn't a bad gig. But had I had a family, that would have been a lot more difficult to kind of try to raise that family on a specialist salary. Even honestly, an E5's salary, I kind of think they should have been included in it. But hey, we'll take what we can get. E1 through E4. What this is going to allow is a lot of service members, especially those with families, that aren't concerned about the Dodge Challenger, but that are concerned about putting food on their family's table, especially given that we are in a profession that doesn't necessarily lend itself to full employment for spouses. So a lot of times these are young families, these are one income families, and it isn't as easy because of our frequent moves, because of necessarily, lack of childcare, because of these long childcare wait lists, for a spouse to go out and bring in an income as well. So it isn't as easy as, they just, are being lazy. That's not the case. The math wasn't mathing for E1s through E4s. The reality is all this truly does, in all honesty, is bring up those E1 salary to about a little over $31,000 a year. So just to put it into perspective of how low those incomes were. Yes, we can include BAH and BAS and all these other things all we want, but at the end of the day, if you make more money working in fast food than you do in the military, there's a problem. I know we're just kind of focusing on that 15% increase, but there's a lot of other things in this bill that we probably will discuss as it progresses, and hopefully, is implemented next year. We're just kind of focused on that 15% right now, but there are tons of other good things in this about military housing, about access to childcare, and about a lot of these other issues that have been really plaguing the military for quite some time now. So I think overall, it's great. I think it's long overdue. There's been a lot of people that have been working really, really, really hard just to get these things put in a bill. This is not a bill that came up within the last year. This is something people have been working on, having their issues placed in it. There's still a lot more work to do, but I do think that this is a great start to improving the quality of life for our military members, their families, and ultimately being able to recruit and retain personnel as we look to face potentially, our next war is not going to be against an unorganized militia. So, everything we can do now to make sure that those that serve are being taken care of is absolutely what we need to be focusing on. So, Jay?
Well, so
Sure.
Jay, before you start, so a question that I've kind of had come up in my own mind as I said what I was saying and James went. So one question I have for you, and you've been out a little bit longer than I have. I still have direct kind of association since I work right around the soldiers. So there might be a little bit of a disconnect for you with the current state of morale. But with this, do you think it's too little too late? Is this something that, because the morale now really is not spectacular. It's very evident when you're around, for us around the soldiers, like you know that it's not like their dream job. So is this something that's great? It's been needed, but in the long run, is it going to have the effect that they intend?
Okay. Well, I think what you're highlighting is not just the military. It's a generational thing, and it's a societal thing for society as a whole right now, especially in that age group, especially in that experience. And I would say just the general population, younger population, gross assumption, gross stereotyping has expectations that things should just be easier and handed to them. But to get, and I'll come back to that. Amanda, you hinted at this a little bit. The why. Why is this important? Not just because they deserve it, but why? $31,000 a year. Who agrees to go put their life on the line for $30,000 a year?
Exactly.
Now, when I joined, however long ago it was, an E1 made $1,000 a month. And I think it's very important that we clarify that E1 to E4, you're restricted to the barracks unless you're married. You're not getting BAH, and you're not getting BAS. You're just getting base pay. And so 15% sounds like a lot, but 15% of $1,000 vice an O1 or an E7, which could be $3,000 to $5,000 base pay. It's not that much, but for the perception of 15%, but that's a lot of money to an E1, E2, E3 who's just joined the military, that hasn't finished their training, that doesn't have their special pays, that is not deployed and getting things tax-free. So that 15% can make a great impact on such a low-income entry-level position into the military while you're going through training. And especially if you have children or a family or a spouse, where most spouses cannot really create careers that transition every 3 to 5 years. It's usually having to start over, or they're a homemaker, or they're working at local spots on base, which can be fast food or just lower income. So I do think that 15% is well deserved, not from a morale perspective, just a basic quality of life perspective, because it's a big increase to that entry level E1 to E4 position before you get to get that BAH and choose your own housing if you're single and not married, before you get your special pays from all the trainings in the schools that you went to. Because that's where we in the military made money. We specialized, we got training, we got certificates, and then we got qualified to earn certain income based on our job, our skill set, and where we would deploy to. So I think there's that context on why, because the income is so low, E1 to E4. You are restricted on what you have access to. And like you highlighted with that Dodge Challenger, there is predatory salesmen out there that just try to capture 70% of your income before taxes, or however that works. So our service members that are just entering are not paid very well. I would say society as a whole, even college graduates, are not paid very well. But the difference is they're not stepping onto a battlefield potentially. Their lives are not in jeopardy because they're not volunteering for service. So I do think this is an awesome thing. I do think it can change morale and just enticement. When 20 years ago, when we, I don't know, let's just say we all joined 20 years ago, let's go be badass. Oh, I don't have to pay for the guns that I've always wanted to fire. I don't have to pay to drive a tank. I don't have to pay to fly in this awesome fighter jet where people go to Las Vegas and pay 10 grand to do something cool where we got paid to do stuff like that. That mindset is not there with this generation that's joining in that low level or lower level, entry level. Even in the officer ranks at the entry level when you're coming as an O1, it's just not there. It's a different mindset. And if we think of the 80-year cycle, we've all heard that. The 80-year cycle. It's been 80 years since World War II. The good times create strong people create, or no, good times create weak people create bad times create strong people, and so on. And it just cycles. So I think we're entering one of those cycles where the world has never been better than it is right now. And I do think the current generation, younger generation, has certain expectations because of the ease at which they've had life thus far, which is perceived to be difficulty because they haven't had the same kind of hardship that we may have had 20 years ago going into the global war on terror, and just the fear that was, I don't know, going through high school and the constant bomb threats. And now there is mass shootings. But to get to your point, Nick, I don't think it's too late. We've seen this ebb and flow of support for the military and yearning for enlistment, yearning to join. We haven't in our lifetime seen the draft. I do see that coming back. It's outside the Marines. No one's hitting their numbers that they need to hit. But I just think the current generation has had it very easy. And I think that is impacting the younger people in the military. So hopefully this 15% helps. I don't know that it'll make a difference in morale. I do think it makes a huge difference in quality of life for those who are just entering, and it's not that big of a financial lift as giving 15% to people who've been in 5 to 10 years. So, yeah, that's my point.
Yeah, I do absolutely agree with you, especially in kind of this idea of entitlement and what people are entitled to versus, making that distinction between what people are entitled to and what is involved in morale. Versus what is, moral. Hey, this isn't about morality. This is just about, hey, you come in, you do this job, and this is what you're going to get paid. But there is that other piece of it that is impacting morale that I believe you're completely hit the head on the nail with is this idea of what someone is entitled to, even amongst those junior military members and their civilian counterparts. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten on a plane in recent years and there's been a junior soldier coming straight out of boot camp that says or makes some type of reference to because they served, they should be in first class. Because they've served, they should. And it's like, bro, you haven't done anything yet. Like, meanwhile, you have, senior individuals that are also flying back and coach next to them. They're just in civilian clothes and they don't know that they're talking to a sergeant major or a lieutenant colonel or something about, how it's. So you're absolutely right. There's when I was at the MIC last year, I met the woman that does the millennial veteran. And, we'd had some good discussions and things at the MIC. And, when I left, I started kind of following her Instagram and stuff. And one of the things that I noticed, even with that, was just kind of this sense of entitlement and how everything is, I hate to use the word victimization, but how everything was
that's what it is.
This tragic event and all of this military trauma that they experienced. And you start to dig into it and it's like, okay, but what was this trauma that you experienced in the military? Sexual assault and PTSD aside, a lot of it was, okay, you never had any of these things happen to you. Like, what is this trauma you're talking about? And it's, the drill sergeant yelled at me. I had to work long hours. Yeah. I had like those types of, I had to go to, I had, and it's like, but that's what you signed up for. Like, that's not really trauma. That's, going through the shitty parts of your job, and maybe
that's part of shaping the force, though. That's part of every military service is to break you down, to build you back to what the standard for all.
It is not breaking you down in this traumatic, like trauma means something
I agree.
Very specific, like
very different. Yes.
You were yelled at, you were broken down, you were yelled at for some, relatively mild infractions. You weren't beat. You weren't like starved. You were not, put in stress positions or anything that is actually traumatic. You got yelled at and were made to stand in formation and do some push-ups. If you didn't do what you were supposed to do.
Even if you didn't do anything wrong.
Even if you didn't do anything wrong.
You'll get in trouble. Yeah. Suck it up.
Yes. That's not trauma, though. That is not trauma. There is just this sense very much, and I'm seeing it more and more and more in those junior enlisted particularly, that have come into service. Well, I am entitled to this. Well, I should be in first class. Well, I should make sergeant as soon as I enter my zone. There was a topic a few weeks ago. I don't know if any of you followed it, but there were 3 young Marines that did the split option, where they went to basic the summer of their senior year. They came back, and then, we're told like, hey, when you go to graduation, yes, you can wear your dress blues, but you still have to wear the gown or the cap and gown during the ceremony. And I believe one of them was like, well, if I can't wear my dress blues, then I'm not going at all. And that mentality, like what appalled me the most actually wasn't so much this young Marine that was like, I will wear my blues come hell or high water. It was actually his parent that was supporting it that kind of was like, really? We all know.
Disappointing.
Yeah, it's like, what happened to that selfless service part of the equation? Did you not learn about that too when you were in the Marines? Like, also Marines are very strict with where you can and can't wear your uniform. You can't even pump gas in your uniform off base. So is this really the hill to die on just because you feel as though you are entitled? Like, you got to wear them during your Marine graduation. Should there be exceptions for wearing your Class A's, your Class B's, your dress blues to high school graduations, even if that's not the high school graduation uniform? So yeah, I mean, I say all that to say is, They could have worn it underneath they didn't want to.
Like everyone else.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But then nobody would know how special they were.
Exactly.
How badass they were.
It's like the social media generation where instant gratification comes, and that leads to that sense of entitlement. Look at me, look at me, look at me.
Not only that, but also the ability
that's
to
what the
kind
old
of
military used to burn out of you. That's what I thought. I'm sorry.
Well, I immediately thought of social media and, hey, what's going to get your followers up, especially from this targeted group, than to say, oh, they won't let me wear my dress blues because they hate the military. It's like, has nothing to do with their feelings on the military. It's this is your uniform for this graduation. And I absolutely do think that social media did play a part in that, because they knew by striking this chord, it did exactly what they thought it was going to do. They had press, they had, it was all over social media. It was in all of the military papers, and they got what they wanted out
if
of
you're
it.
already having trouble following uniform guidelines, your military career is not going to be a fun one, buddy.
I was going to say, joke's on that guy, because when he goes back after his little split option, he goes back to his A school or whatever. I'm like,
you're the guy.
Get your toothbrush out. Get your
Come here, movie star.
Come here, movie star.
Yep.
Yeah, I will definitely actually be following all three of these individuals, because I'm curious myself to see how many of them even end up doing more than one enlistment. I would be surprised if any, to be perfectly honest. But
zero of them will.
But yeah, it goes back to that sense of entitlement.
Give everyone a chance. That's what I thought the training of, especially in the Marine Corps. I went to OCS, and it was in the Navy. You had Marine drill instructors who trained Navy officers at Officer Candidate School. And man, I loved every second of it. It was amazing. But they don't just break you down. They may strip some aspects of you. They strip you of the bullshit, that sense of entitlement, and they help you realize what you're part of, and you're part of something bigger than yourself. And that's what I liked, and that's what I fear is being removed somewhat from some military training. I don't know which branch it is, and not to call anything out, but it seems like it's nowhere near as intense, just from what I'm hearing. I don't know. I'm not in the game anymore, but I do believe that intensity of training is required and should be, because it helps your mental fortitude and your physical strength to prepare for what you actually are going to have to deal with when chaos comes. And if you're not training in chaos, then when chaos happens, you'll break. That's what the whole point of training is. So I am worried a little bit of our training pipeline or lowering recruiting standards. I'm a little worried about that.
But. Speaking of, since you said recruiting standards, my favorite Navy guy, the Navy just got rid of a GED requirement.
So to put in context the GED requirement, because I think a lot of people, there's this misunderstanding that the military is kind of for the washouts and go to jail or go to the military and things like that. Yes, those of us in the military know that is not the case. And the GED standard kind of ebbs and flows with recruiting crisis. When we are meeting goals, it comes back. You must have at least a GED. When our recruiting was very high, actually, it's not only if you have a GED, you also have to have an associate's degree. And I remember a few years ago actually digging in a little bit as to, okay, well, why is that? Why would you need an associate's degree if you have a GED? Like, what's the difference? And the statistics were actually pretty interesting. So when an individual enlists with no GED, no high school diploma, the odds of them not completing their first term are really, really high. And with every level of education, the odds of someone completing their first term increases significantly, which is why which is part of the reason that the military, especially during the increases following 9/11, was really looking for college-educated individuals to enlist, was because they knew they would finish their first term. I'll have to dig in and find those statistics, but it was actually really eye-opening as to what your level of education sometimes really does, statistically anyway, show about your ability to succeed in a certain field. Once again, that is not always the case. There are some that have come in with not even a GED that have gone on to do great things. But statistically speaking, it was very eye-opening to see what those different education levels meant when it came to finishing the first term.
That makes sense. showing that correlation in statistics makes sense. If we talk about a bachelor's degree, how many people complete a bachelor's degree and whatever their degree was in, go on to pursue a career in that? It's very rare. Oh, and kind of the mindset, or as being in business for some time, it's kind of like a gateway, a bachelor's degree or any degree. It just shows some form of dedication to a process, to going through hardship. And that shows it, okay, well, they didn't quit when it was easy. They stuck through it when it was hard. I can see something in that individual. Yeah. So I totally understand that correlation with success in the military or sticking through a term.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely does make sense. I'm trying to explain so I have a 17-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And right now we are trying to explain to the 17-year-old, like, it doesn't matter that you're great in coding and stuff. You still have to be good in all these things you don't want to do, because it's in doing the things that you don't want to do that you are building yourself to actually be successful. Anyone can go and do if we all went and did what we wanted to do every day, the world would be a very different place. You're probably not going to have a lot of CEOs and doctors and other things out there because everyone's just out doing what they want. To own a business, we don't just get to do the 10% of stuff that we like to do all day. Making and drinking and talking about whiskey, making woodworking, designing shirts and stupid, silly mugs. That's what I want to do. But I have to spend 90% of my day doing the things I don't want to do. Doing social media, doing taxes, doing accounting, doing market, all of these things. But if I don't do those things, then the one thing I want to do is not going to be successful. And I think that's what a lot of people, especially some of these younger individuals, don't understand is, well, you can't just do what you want to do and make a living. You've got to do a lot of other things that you don't want to do to actually get successful enough to be able to do the one thing you want to do. So
I have a sticker on my stand here for my computer. But it's a quote, kind of a philosophy and mindset that I really try to live by now. But it's journey before destination. And so with that, the goal you're searching for, that's great. But all the work that goes towards achieving the goal is the real value. That's where you learn, and that's where you grow as an individual. And that the goal might be that 10%. But all the work we had to do to get to where we can enjoy that 10%, there's true value there because you're growing, you're learning, and you're getting better. And eventually that 10% can become 20% once you get really good. But I think what we're talking about in different ways, whether it's college, whether it's going through training, basic training up to your specialization, it's that journey you go on where you're learning as an individual. And does the destination ever truly come? The journey just keeps continuing, I think.
All right, so we are at about the hour-and-a-half mark. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up the formal portion of the podcast. Join
Cheers.
us next week. Hopefully, Zach will be able to join us. I believe next week we are talking hot sauce with Hot Sauce Boss. So
all right,
we've got bourbon this week, hot sauce next week. We're gonna have to get everyone together and start turning this into a foodie show.
Scotch.
I guess.
Scotch. Not bourbon,
Scotch. I know. I'm sorry. I'm a bourbon drinker.
It's okay. You're my ideal customer.
Brown liquor.
I'm excited for hot sauce. That's awesome.
Yes, I am too. So yeah,
when
we'll
you
see
get Zach
everyone
on, he's got to be blacked out. He's got to have a voice scaler higher.
Oh, I know, right? We have ideas for how we're going to represent Zach if he doesn't show up next week. We've got you'll have to stay tuned. We have some things we're working to represent Zach effectively. But okay, we'll see everyone next.
Send me the link. I'll tune in.
Absolutely. Okay, it was great talking to you, Jay. Best of luck in all of your adventures and maintaining your status as the most interesting man in the room. Can't wait to meet you in September. We're definitely going to have to get together and work on getting Nick drunk.
There we go. Can't wait.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Man, great seeing Jay.
Where the fuck is Zach?